Dude, thanks so much for having me over.
Well, it's about time. I mean, I've been to your place, 3-4 times now?
Who's counting, though? I mean, come on.
Heathelton, quick, the natives are here. The arms are prepared, sir. Quick, Thomas Fur, fire.
Aye, sir.
Jesus.
That almost hit me, man.
What are you guys doing in my video game room?
It's not even record day, man.
Right?
Indeed, it is not, Noble Savage. But I heard you were coming to see Noah's collection of boring Nintendos, and this week's episode got me thinking, why don't I just take that collection and then you'll hang out with me?
That's not how it works, man.
And they aren't Nintendos, they're second-gen systems. I don't have to explain myself to you. You collect magic books.
Okay, Eli, I get you, but Heath, Tom, really? Come on, guys.
Okay. In my defense, I was promised gold.
And?
Is mostly old Nintendos.
They're not, Nintendo didn't even have
Tom,
a Gen 2
what
system.
about you?
Oh, Eli told me that if we took over his antique video game system collection room, it would just upset him. It would upset him.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Antique video game systems, yes. Not for the other thing, though.
Oh, plus there was a cannon. You said like cannon.
Sure, yeah, no, that was pretty cool. That was
So big.
So cool.
Hello and welcome to Citation Needed, podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it on Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts. Because this is the internet. That's how it works now. I'm Cecil, and I'll be running this ship aground, but I need my crew to help me do just that. First up, two guys that drank all our rum 15 minutes into our voyage, Heath and Tom.
Yeah, that's me. I drink.
You do.
I drink a lot. I'm a drinker.
he's also
Better
tall.
than the incest thing, dude.
Cool. Yeah. How did that go? I'm leaning into it. Yes, I drink a lot, and that's it. I drink so I can fuck my sister. What? No, we're not adding a thing. No.
Also joining us tonight, two guys rightfully upset that we just didn't stay at the island paradise where we loaded all our cargo, Eli and Noah.
Yeah, Fountain of Youth, Schmountain of Youth. We missed karaoke night for this,
Right.
Cecil.
Me and my mutant knee-jerk reactions, right?
Your knee-jerk is so good. That's so good. Today, we set sail searching for the legendary City of Gold that would allow us to continue to make this show indefinitely. Until we find it, though, we're going to have to rely on your generous resupply efforts, patrons. And if you'd like to learn how to join their ranks, be sure to stick around till the end of the show. And with that out of the way, tell us, Tom, what person, place, thing, concept, phenomenon, or event will we be talking about today?
Today we will be talking about the Narvaez Expedition.
And Tom, you quickly scanned a cracked article about history's biggest fails. Are you ready to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before?
Florida?
Yeah. No man has wanted to go before.
Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Okay,
Yes,
all right.
absolutely.
Rock it.
All right, 2 weeks ago, I admit that I waxed somewhat poetic about the spirit of exploration that animated the early 1900s, and I thought it would be worth spending an essay talking about another age of exploration, which was significantly less admirable and not at all immune to poor planning, bad luck, and utter failure.
Heath's teen years.
Okay, that's a different essay.
That's accurate, nonetheless. Moving on.
I'm talking here about the late 15th and 16th century, an age of European race to colonize every stretch of land they could land a ship upon. At this time, Spain was in sort of a colonizer's arms race with the English and the French. Vast fortunes were made by successful voyages of exploitation when they succeeded, which they very often did not. The Narvaez Expedition is one of those stories that shows just how badly things can go when trying to plant your flag anywhere you can find a hole without first gaining enthusiastic consent.
Okay, Tom, we already agreed I get to do the essay on Harvey Weinstein. Stop trying to backdoor your way in, okay?
Okay, so I want to be super clear here. vast fortunes were made by successful voyages of exploitation is the phrase that Tom used, but you could also just say vast fortunes were stolen.
That's also fair. That's also
another
fair.
way of saying the same.
Simpler, more concise writing. I appreciate it.
The Adam Smith right there.
On the Wealth of
you
Nations.
got it.
They just
Thank
stole
you.
that shit.
Classic. Boring economics book reference. Thank you, Noah.
Yeah, no, that's a much shorter version is the honest one. Yeah,
absolutely. TLDR. Vast fortunes were stolen. There you go.
And end of essay. Actually, end of essay.
Saved my parents a bunch of money right there. Fuck. I like your incest bits better if we're giving notes live.
Oh, Jesus.
I like your other jokes better if we're giving notes live. Hurtful.
I know this story really begins before anyone sets foot on a ship. One of the things that I'm amazed by here is how these colonial expeditions were set up like a cross between Blackwater Mercenaries for Hire and a Jimmy John's franchise. In order to begin
Blackwater,
it's not that much. In order to begin the journey, Panfilo de Narvaez had to petition for a license to attempt to claim a piece of the Gulf Coast of the United States for the Kingdom of Spain, which seems rather like asking your dad for permission to steal a car to give back to him for Christmas.
Yeah, but your dad stole it from your indigenous neighbor.
Yeah.
And once permission to conquer land for Spain was granted, Spain doesn't actually do fuck all to assist that effort. The contract for conquest that Narvaez was granted gave him 1 year to gather and hire a private army, leave Spain, travel to the Gulf Coast across the ocean, found 2 towns of at least 100 people each, and garrison 2 forts along the coast. And if this sounds like rather a lot to do in a year, the contract also stipulated that Narvaez had to secure all of his own funding to do all of this shit completely on his own.
Okay, how hard could it possibly be to show up next to Mexico and build a few walls? Like, what is that?
Well, alas, Heath, it would be a few centuries yet before there would even be a Mexico to pay for it.
This really was very much like conquest by franchise. It was. The potential for incredible rewards for Narvaez were enormous. Previous colonialists, such as Cortez, made for themselves enormous fortunes. See, even though the land itself would be stolen from the native inhabitants in the name of the Kingdom of Spain, a significant portion of the spoils from this conquering went right into the pockets of those doing the actual conquering. Narvaez sold his expedition to investors by invoking the story of Cortez, and he promised that he too would bring riches untold back from his voyage. The ploy worked, and along with significant personal investment, he raised the money needed to finance his private army of mercenary sailors and soldiers. And it was precisely because so much money was at stake, though, that the Spanish crown appointed their own man as second in command of the expedition. Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca was to act as the eyes and ears of the king, primarily to make sure that the 20% kickback on all the spoils did make its way back to the crown.
I don't know that much Spanish, but I do know a little bit. At some point, the King of Spain was like, all right, we need a serious guy to oversee this thing. Alan head of a cow? Alan? Alan head of a cow?
I know.
You're on it. That's you. This is serious.
The rest of the crew consisted of a guy whose job title was Royal Inspector of Mines? I guess in case they discovered like local mines whose paperwork might be out of date. I don't know what he's doing. A comptroller, because war for hire needs quality accounting ledgers. A contingent of priests, a shit ton of soldiers, and for some reason, an Aztec prince. I don't know why, but he's in the list. Huh. All told, the expedition included 600 people, 450 troops, officers, and slaves, and 150 sailors, wives, and servants. They set sail on July 17th, 1527.
Okay, now that might seem like a lot of characters to keep track of, but obviously the director's just padding it so he can kill a bunch of them off and still have a story's worth.
Sometime in August, the expedition arrived at Santo Domingo, which is now part of the Dominican Republic. Pretty much immediately, crew began deserting the expedition. This is their first stop. Now, I want to be fair here, and I want to acknowledge that some amount of attrition is normal for these voyages. Many times, some portion of the crew who set sail underestimated the harsh reality of life on the sea, while others would fall ill or become injured and be unable to continue. But the level of desertion at the very first stop was quite high, and almost certainly because at port, the expedition crew learned of the fate of a prior expedition. Rumors about the disastrous voyage of Lucas Vasquez de Ayllón, in which 450 of their 600-man force perished before returning home, ignited fear among the Narvaez expedition. 100 of the original 600 deserted the mission at Santo Domingo.
Yeah, and then the captain writes an op-ed about how no one wants to do a hard day's conquering anymore.
Everyone's writing about him on r/anti-conquer. The whole thing.
Now, while losing 18% of your workforce doesn't exactly scream good management, the expedition pressed on, landing in Cuba a few weeks later. Narvaez was himself from Cuba, and he had family there, so this stop was pretty much on plan. And since he was now home and he was well connected, he was able to resupply his ship, get some more horses, and hire men to replace some of those who chose to stay behind on the beaches of the DR. Narvaez met with his buddy, Vasco Porcayo, who had a hookup in Trinidad to get more supplies and horses. Narvaez split his fleet and sent some of them off to Trinidad to go shopping.
Okay, everyone. As you probably know by now, we've had a real desertion problem. So here's a bunch of our money. Now leave the country with no way to track it. Don't go away.
Okay, you want me to leave like a card on the bar? I don't understand. You want one of my boots? How do you stop this from happening? I could just leave, right? Like, there's nothing you can do.
And Narvaez was going to take 4 ships and continue on to the Gulf of, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Guacanayabo, which is still part of Cuba, while Cabeza, the king's man and second in command, took 2 ships and headed over to Trinidad to get some horses. Cabeza led the 2 ships to Trinidad well enough, but pretty much immediately after they got done shopping for horses and supplies and gate checking their luggage, a wild hurricane appeared. The vicious storm sank both the ships, killed 60 men, a fifth of the horses they had just acquired, and sent all the rest of the supplies they had just purchased to the bottom of the sea. Cabeza survived.
So, okay, but I feel like another possibility we should acknowledge is that Cabeza and some of the other guys found themselves sitting on a tiny little boat watching some newly wealthy deserters sail into the sunset thinking, okay, guys, we're going to need a better story. So there's a hurricane. A big hurricane.
Storm.
Whoosh.
There's a storm.
Whoosh.
And then Bill caught this huge fish. It was huge. It was so big. So big.
Narvaez realized he needed to make some adjustments. He's now down a significant number of his original troops. He has 2 less ships than he had when he started, as well as a shortage of horses and supplies. And all that he has done so far is to stop at home before really beginning his expedition and the conquest phase. But Narvaez was nothing if not well connected, and he was also pretty fucking wealthy. So he sent the 4 remaining ships under the command of Cabeza,
who was crushing it so far.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. While Narvaez stayed behind to try to hire more men and purchase more ships. That MX Black card was absolutely smoking when he put it back into his wallet.
He's like, I'm at my credit limit. Will you work for Instagram exposure? Because you're probably going to die of actual exposure anyway.
Right, yeah, what does it really matter?
I heard he tried to fundraise from his own crew, on the boat. He called it First Matreon.
That's good. Very good. I like that. It was very good.
Fun.
But sailing ships aren't something you just buy off the shelf. And hiring people to join your weird soldier of fortune team takes a little bit of time. So it took Narvaez 4 more months before he rejoined the bulk of his force at Cienfuegos. He had 2 new ships and some new recruits, but the expedition is down to about 400 men and 80 horses. And the 4 months wait meant that the men who were waiting were also literally chewing through their supplies. They planned to set sail to Havana for one last restock of the cupboard before making their way to Florida. That's what they planned to do. What they actually did was to turn over the navigation duties to a brand new guy they just hired who claimed to be a master pilot with extensive knowledge of the Gulf Coast.
Feels like
this
he's
master
wrong.
pilot,
Feels like a lie.
yeah, this master pilot, Diego Minuelo, took all of 2 days to run the entire fleet aground on the
There
shoals
it is.
of Canarreos just off the coast of Cuba, where they remained stuck for 3 weeks until a big-ass storm came along and just blew them off the shoals.
Never let Eli drive. It's like the rules.
Okay, in my very obvious ancestor's defense, this is as much the last guy to run aground's fault as it is the first guy to run aground.
Yeah, or more so even because the first guy didn't just watch 3 other motherfucking boats run aground.
Now, even lower on supplies than before from their unexpected layover, the fleet continued on toward Havana, still beset by storms. The crew eventually rounded the western edge of Cuba and were making their way to the port of Havana, getting so close they could see the masts of the ships docked in port when another storm blew up and blew the fleet into the Gulf of Mexico. Still lacking their much-needed resupply, Narvaez gave up trying to supply his expedition properly and pressed on with their plans to colonize the Gulf Coast.
Who needs supplies?
Yeah. They will, it turns out. The Gulf had other ideas. Even though Cuba is close enough to Florida that in 2013, a 64-year-old woman swam from one to the other, the fleet still spent a full month battling the Gulf Stream, struggling to reach land.
They should have asked that lady to tow him.
She
Right?
could. On April 12, 1528, the expedition spotted what is now known as Tampa Bay. But evidently realizing that there's nothing worth stopping for in Tampa, the fleet didn't make land, choosing instead to look for what their master pilot insisted was a great harbor nearby.
Dick.
2 more days into looking for this harbor, one of the fleet's 5 remaining ships sank. It doesn't say why, but I admire their pluck. I do.
They're just going along. A 60-year-old woman is just swimming around their boat for a month, taunting them.
She pulls up next to him. Hard eye contact, revs her engine somehow. How did she do that?
Okay. But so okay, look, if the options are sink or Florida, they made the right choice. Right? Let's not pretend otherwise.
Narvaez, perhaps sensing that their master pilot had somehow padded his resume, ordered the fleet to enter the next shallow harbor they found. They came upon Boca Ciego Bay in what is now St. Petersburg and made land after sighting signs of local civilization. They were excited to see that the land wasn't unoccupied because they desperately needed food, water, and to be very frank here, conquering land itself isn't nearly as prosperous as conquering people on that same land and then just stealing all their shit.
All right, all the natives ran away when we came ashore. This kind of, I don't know, this ruins it for me. Like, I guess I'll pillage, but like, this is boring.
I heard they couldn't see the ships. This is bullshit.
Now, I love this part. The first guy off the ship was actually the comptroller.
What?
Who pretty much immediately began trading with the indigenous peoples for fresh fish and venison. This detail isn't actually at all interesting, except that chronologically, this comes before Narvaez ordering the rest of the crew to disembark and make camp, which means the accountant basically splashed his way alone up the beach trying to like get takeout while everyone else was still unbuckling themselves from the car. Thus making the first time I've ever identified with an accountant.
The accountant's like, I can give you, you know what? Just take it all. I'm just going to kill all of you in 10 minutes and take it back anyway. Just have what you want.
At this point, the expedition was basically illegally squatting on land that belonged to the native inhabitants. And this would not do. So the day after setting foot in Florida, the crew of the expedition assembled and declared that the land they stood on was, by order of the Pope and their franchisee license, now the property of Charles V.
Oh, cool. I thought they were going to do something ethical there. I think you were setting it up like they were going to be like, oh, you know what? This is wrong. We shouldn't.
Ethical will not be the bag.
No.
Mm-mm. Now, because they were also fair and Christian men, they also declared that everyone who lived on the land had the choice to convert right now to Christianity so they could be loved as brothers and sisters in Christ, or they could be slaughtered wholesale and war waged against them. Totally their call.
The natives are like, oh, good. I was afraid we were going to have to sit through a fucking timeshare pitch. Okay. All right. This is take way less time.
We can't
No, the
afford not
natives-
to be Christian. It's true.
The natives, some of whom somehow got the gist of this assembly, both pleaded with the leaders of the expedition and threatened them. Their entreaties fell on deaf ears, and Narvaez decided to stroll about and explore some of the land he had just claimed by rights of his Jimmy John's war certificate or whatever, and over which he had now declared himself governor. After bopping about and sightseeing for a bit, he returned to have a chat with his master pilot.
How is that guy still the master pilot? He's already fucked up several times, right?
They don't have a good second choice, though. He ordered the master pilot to take one of the ships with a small crew and sail back to find that great harbor that he had been so excited about earlier. The master pilot was to return to Cuba if he was unsuccessful finding that great harbor, as he had proven thus far unsuccessful in finding anything that he was actually looking for.
Han, would you run to the store and get 2% milk? And if they don't have that, will you sail 5 months back to Cuba for me, sweetie?
Also, you failed 9 times at getting 2% milk, to be clear. So I feel like this is a bad idea.
Just weird because your title is Master Milk Getter.
Narvaez was responsible now for turning this mess into a profit. So he took a small party and explored a ways inland where he encountered another village. Here, the Spaniards found a little bit of food and gold, but nothing worth getting excited about, and which they pillaged anyway. These villagers convinced the Spaniards that maybe they should go bother their neighbors to the north, the Appalachee. Narvaez thought this was a fine idea and made his plans to head north.
Okay, based on the story so far, I'm guessing the natives just kept pointing them to bigger and bigger tribes till eventually he ended up invading Spain?
That would be amazing. At this point, Narvaez decided the best way to cover the most ground was to split his force into a land and sea division. The land crew would consist of 300 men heading north on foot through undeveloped Florida, while the 100 remaining men would take the remaining ships and sail up the coast where they would supposedly rendezvous. Narvaez thought this would work because he thought the mouth of Tampa Bay was just like a hop, skip, and a jump north, when in fact it was actually south from where he was at. The idea was such a bad one that Cabeza vociferously objected, though he was ultimately overruled. Narvaez then asked Cabeza to lead the fleet of ships, but Cabeza insisted on joining Narvaez because he was basically being called a chicken and his fragile ego couldn't take the insult.
Well, that means it's time to take a break. When we get back, we'll be exploring where the Washington football team got its name, but let's stop for a little apropos of nothing.
Hello there, local savage.
Hi. Hi.
Me conquering Spaniard. You subject.
Dude, I speak Spanish. You guys have been here for like 20 years, 30 years?
Okay, well, I have good news. Today is the day you get a chance to become a Christian. Become a Christian, and you shall be treated as a brother. Resist, and you will die as I take these lands which are rightfully mine.
Rightfully yours, huh?
Yeah, these lands are mine by birth, and by the granted writ of Spain.
I see. Oh, okay, I'll tell you what. I'm in.
You're in? Nobody says that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I'm all the way Christian now, accept Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior. The only problem now is you.
Oh, what about me?
Well, you own these lands by birth, and Christians like me are conquering them. So, I'm sorry, can I borrow that musket of yours? You natives really shouldn't have those.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But I'll tell you, I'll make you a deal. If you convert to Christianity, I will spare you.
But I'm already Christian.
Ooh, that's too bad. Nothing I can do for you then. Sorry.
No, I get it. And fair is fair. Hey, as long as you don't teach my kids critical race theory, am I right?
Okay. All right.
Well, when we left off, the expedition was blindfolded. They spun him around 3 times, and Native Americans were yelling, Marco. What happened next?
It's a little more organized than they were. The 300 men who set off on foot were no better supplied at this point than when they were undersupplied a few weeks prior, like on board their ships. They were near to starvation when 2 weeks into their trek, they came upon a village and immediately enslaved its inhabitants and ate all of their food, including the corn in their fields, like locusts with silly metal hats.
Okay, Locusts and Silly Hats is my Ted Nugent cover band. Nailed it.
Oh.
Fall back to last week.
Locust and silly metal hats is also a pretty apt description of conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
So.
And Narvaez sent 2 smaller parties downstream from a local river to see if they could spot the ships they hoped to rendezvous with, but to no avail. And I love this part. Remember the dumbass master pilot who was supposed to either find the Great Harbor or go back to Cuba? He didn't do either.
Neither of those things happened? Yeah.
No, none of them. When he couldn't find the harbor he had evidently invented in a fever dream, he didn't go to Cuba as he was ordered. Instead, he headed back to Tampa Bay, but now everyone was all gone. He then headed back to Cuba and returned to Tampa Bay with a ship full of supplies. And here he actually met up with the other boats who had looked for the land force with no luck for quite some time. Together, the fleet of ships decided they were just going to fuck right off and go to Mexico rather than continue to be a part of any of this shit.
Oh, God. It's the colonial version of you didn't text us back, so we ate without you. You hate to see it. You hate to see it.
The land force continued their foray north when they ran into the Timucua people. The Timucua chief and Narvaez were able to communicate a bit through hand gestures, and the chief was made to understand that the Spaniards were on their way to meet the Appalachian. Since the Timucua and the Appalachian were enemies, the Timucua were more than happy to help lead these deadly idiots to the door of their foes. Now, this brings me to the incident at the river. The Timucua led the expedition north until they reached a river, and I guess this river just confused the shit out of one Juan Velasquez because on horseback, he just fucking gunned the horse and charged into the river. This promptly drowned the man and the horse, and I think
Probably what's happening there. Yep.
very likely confused the hell out of everybody watching and certainly freaked out the Timucua.
Did he think that horse was Jesus?
This guy's covered in metal armor and just ran into the
Jesus
river.
Christ.
The starving army ate the horse. This was actually the very first casualty that didn't die in a shipwreck, but it would not be their last.
Yeah, well, the first, unless we count the natives, which obviously we do.
Yeah, no, we know.
And you can't make me learn about that either, damn it.
It's against the goddamn law.
You know what? Just for that, I elected a guy I don't know anything about to be governor.
No, this is okay. We're talking about Spaniards doing it. It's fine.
Yeah.
They don't have any issue with that at all.
Now, the next night, while getting water, an arrow was shot at, but missed one of Narvaez's men. Maybe to see if he'd chase it like a dog fetching at a stick.
Shoot it into a river, see what happens.
The very next morning, a Folgers crystal switcheroo took place, and all the Timucua natives were gone, and hostile local natives had taken their place.
Will they notice?
You son of a bitch. Kill your whole family.
Somehow, Narvaez figured it out, and they managed to capture a few of them, who they pressed into acting as guides, and the expedition continued northward toward the Appalachian, whom they were sure had gold, and which they were quite sure they would have no trouble overwhelming and defeating.
Okay, so we're lost, and a bunch of us are dead, and Juan thought he was Aquaman or something. I don't know what happened there. No, it's fine. It's fine. We got this. We keep going.
On June 25th, 1528, the Narvaez expedition came upon a village of about 40 homes, which they immediately mistook for the Appalachian capital. An absolutely perfect example of the wild underestimation of the natives that characterized this whole detestable endeavor. After sacking the village, Narvaez and his men found none of the expected gold, but they did find plentiful food. They took a number of hostages and then installed themselves in the homes they had just captured, thinking they had defeated the Appalachian, though disappointed by the lack of spoils for their efforts.
They're all walking around the next day rocking. They're like, I defeated the Appalachian, and all I got for it was this lousy t-shirt duds.
They could not have been more wrong about defeating the Appalachian. Almost immediately, the first band of 200 warriors attacked Narvaez and his men, using burning arrows to set fire to the homes the men were occupying. A second force of 200 warriors attacked the next day, this time with larger, more powerful bows and attacking from the other side of the village.
This is pretty easy to thwart, guys. All we have to do is take sharpened stakes and put them at a 45-degree angle. We're gonna be good.
So I love that they saved the big bows for the second wave,
Right?
like some kind of movie villain busting out the rocket launcher. Like, were they trying to give the Spaniards a fighting chance here?
I feel like there was a big fight when they were like, all right, you're the first guys. You're the small bow guys. And they're like, what? This is tiny.
Why would the bigger bows all be on the other side? We could put half the big bows on this side and half the big bows on
We
that
could just
side.
win right now with the big bows. Why are we doing this? No, I told you guys we're going for roguelite. We're going for roguelite.
The Spaniards were forced to abandon the village, but the warriors continued to press their advantage, assaulting quickly from the dense cover of the surrounding wilderness and fading back into the woods before the occupiers could reload their slower, more cumbersome weapons. This went on for 3 weeks before the Spanish decided to head back south, hoping now to lose their pursuers and run instead into the Aute, a tribe which they heard was smaller and had plenty of food they could steal.
You guys just want to go back down south and wait for our Uber there? Do you guys want to do that? Or?
That seems like a really good idea. Oh, guys, we were getting our ass kicked in this Arby's parking lot. I'm going to head over to Wendy's and pick a fight there. I hope that guy's smaller. That's my hope, is that he's a smaller guy.
To reach the Aute, the expedition had to cross a large swamp, which as soon as they entered and were up to their chests in water and mud, they were again attacked with a brutal shower of arrows. Stuck in the muck, their horses were of no use in chasing down or intimidating their attackers. Their weapons were too slow and heavy, and their armor, while protective, weighed them down, making them much slower. Once free of the deepest part of the water, they were able to force their attackers to retreat again into the woods. But this same chain of events repeated again and again over the course of 2 more weeks as they slogged their way through the Floridian swamp. Upon reaching the Aute, they discovered that it had already been burnt to the ground and deserted, though they were able to scrounge enough food from the surrounding area to feed their starving party for a moment. But things were extremely dire for the Spaniards. Cabeza went forward to scout for a way back to the ocean, but he was unable to find the ocean.
What?
He did, however, find shallow, salty beds full of oysters. Narvaez loaded up all the horses with the sick and wounded, and they made their way to the muddy shallows.
Conquistador Eli is like, ooh, oysters. Are you hinting at something, Captain Cabeza?
The men were starting to break down.
Starting. They're just warming up.
There were serious discussions about the relative merits of cannibalism at this point. And some of the caballeros, basically the cowboys in charge of the horses, strongly considered just taking the horses and ditching the rest of the party. Finally, after a few days camped among the muck digging for oysters, one of the men suggested they reforge the metal in their armor and weapons, build new boats, and sail to Mexico.
Jesus.
And as insane as this plan sounds, it was the best idea they had, and the party agreed to give it a try.
All right, the vote was 32-31. We're doing a reset. We're bankers from Boston now. We're clocking it.
Now you have to pause here and admire what reforging their armor and weapons in the middle of a Florida swamp actually means, just work-wise. To reforge the metal, they had to build a goddamn forge from swamp stuff. And they did. They cut down trees one after another, and they slowly burned them to make charcoal. They forged a bellows from deer skin. Once the forge was made, they beat their swords not into plowshares, but into axes, saws, and nails. They stitched their shirts into sails and gathered pine pitch to make caulking for the boats. The whole time they were working on building their makeshift boats, the Appalachee continued their intermittent guerrilla assaults, twice killing 10 men gathering oysters within sight of the Spanish camp.
Ow, we're not even doing war stuff anymore. You guys are dicks. We're the bad guys now.
Yeah, 4 seems low for people who just made nails out of their muskets, though, right?
Yeah.
The horses, they were all killed and eaten, and the hides and hair turned into rope and storage bags. A mere 6 weeks after beginning, and this is actually pretty fucking impressive, they managed to construct 5 ships from tools made from reforged armor, sails from shirts, rope from animals, and trees felled by hand in the swamp. At this point, only 242 men from the original 600 were left alive. Each of the 5 ships was able just barely to carry 50 men. The men set sail 2 days after completing the 5 boats.
The people that are waiting for them to return with the untold riches are like, come on, man. What are they, like, building the boats? Come on, guys.
Worst IPO ever. This sucks.
Life at sea.
Initial pillage offer.
Life at sea would not prove easier on the already weakened men. The ships headed west, but storms, along with starvation and thirst, reduced the 242 survivors down to 80 before another hurricane bore down on the beleaguered men and ground the ships on a small barrier where the men continued to endure even more starvation and disease.
Right.
This time, their misery was so terrible, they named the island of Misfortune and the Island of Doom. Now, historians believe that they actually landed in Galveston, Texas. So the names track.
Yeah. But their power grid was like so independent, guys. It was amazing. All their own.
We're just as good at staying warm.
Narvaez was no longer in charge of anything at this point. He was sick and useless, and the command of the dwindling band of men was now led by Cabeza.
He started useless, though. He didn't need an illness for that.
That is very fair. For the next 4 years, the men lived among a number of indigenous...
years?
Yeah, 4 years.
Jesus.
4 years to wait for your profits. The next 4 years, the men lived among a number of indigenous tribes of South Texas. Cabeza became something of an armchair anthropologist, actually, keeping detailed notes on the cultures and traditions of the various people he and his men met and gleaned their meager survival from. By 1532, there were only 4 men of the original 600 left alive. Narvaez was not among them. The surviving foursome headed out of South Texas, hoping to reach a Spanish outpost in Mexico. They traveled across Texas, into New Mexico, into Arizona, through Mexico to the Pacific Ocean before turning around, becoming, quite by accident, the first Europeans to travel the American Southwest. They did not find the outpost.
Hey, boss, is there any way we can stop deciding the direction we go in by throwing a dart? Is that possible?
Okay, Mexico is down and to the left. Look at the map. It made sense for us to do this.
Which one of us is the fucking master pilot here, okay?
In 1536, the survivors ran into some fellow Spaniards in Mexico who were there kidnapping people to enslave and export them. Cabeza would write of this encounter that the Spaniards they encountered were, quote, dumbfounded at the sight of me, strangely dressed and in the company of Indians. They just stood, staring at me for a long time. The 4 survivors and the Spanish slavers traveled together to Mexico City, where they recovered from their ordeal. One of the survivors, a Moor named Estevanico, went on to become a guide for other expeditions, while Cabeza returned to Spain and wrote a full account of the fate of the doomed expedition, and described in detail the many customs of the many indigenous peoples that he both imperiled and was imperiled by. And I would like to say that he learned a hard lesson here on the evils of colonialism, but he didn't. Instead, after writing his fucking memoirs, he went on to serve the Spanish colonial government, this time trying to make South America great again.
Okay. If you had to summarize what you learned in one sentence, Tom, what would it be?
Florida wasn't worth the trouble then, and it is not worth the trouble now.
That's very true. Ready for the quiz?
I am.
All right. Eli, earlier you were talking about what the captain did fundraising from his own sailors, right? What was that called?
First Matreon.
First Patreon. Speaking of which, what's the best place to crowdfund your pirate stuff? Speaking of that, Tom.
All right. Yep.
A, Kickstarter. R.
R. Okay.
Thank you, Eli. B, GoFundMe.
I like that one. That's
Yeah.
good.
Or C, Windy Go-Go.
Oh, that's good too. That's good. That's good
Because
too.
they sail.
All right. I'm going to go with GoFundMe, where the clock is ticking.
Nice.
I was going to say it was a different one, but that's excellent. You added something. It's correct. And it's the
All right.
formula.
Hooked you.
Yes.
He hooked you.
Nailed it.
All right, Tom. Based
Yes.
on your last two essays, what's your next essay going to be about? A, that time I almost made it to the bathroom at that Ruby Tuesdays. B, all of Heath's romantic relationships. C, Noah's ill-fated sojourn as a hostage
Hey,
negotiator.
I didn't give up shit. I won that negotiation.
We did, it's true. Or D, Cecil agreeing to do this podcast with me.
All right. Well, it can't be D because we don't cover tragedies of that scale. They're just not funny. It's got to be C. Noah's ill-fated sojourn as a hostage negotiator. I would pay limitless funds to watch that.
Yeah.
Limitless.
Yeah.
But you think I give
This
a
is the
fuck
police.
about those assholes? No, I don't care. But you're not getting any money. Fucking break. All right, I got one for you, Tom. What is the moral of this story?
All right.
A, never enter into a military endeavor without sufficient intelligence and sufficient information gathered in advance of the operation to assist commanders in their decisions. B, Florida man was always going to be a thing. There was nothing we could do about it. C, if you find yourself stranded in Florida, get the fuck out of there, even if you have to build a forge to make the tools to turn your clothes into an ocean-worthy vessel.
True.
Or D, the native tribes that conquistadors came to rape and pillage still treated Hispanic immigrants better than the Trump Justice Department.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Well, D's got too much of a fucking truth
Too much
bomb.
truth. I agree.
That's a little harsh. It's a little harsh. C is just good advice. I'm going with C.
Oh, I'm sorry you were so close. It was B. There weren't enough
that's
Florida
awesome.
man jokes
That
in the
means
essay.
Noah's our winner.
All right. Well, I think Cecil, you should have to do an essay next week because it's just been too long.
Okay. All right. Well, for Noah, Eli, Heath, and Tom, I'm Cecil. Thanking you for hanging out with us today. We'll be back next week, and by then, I will be an expert on something else. Between now and then, listen to all our other shows. You can find them at citationpod.com. And if you'd like to help keep this show going, you can make a per-episode donation at patreon.com/citationpod, or you can leave us a 5-star review everywhere you can, but the money's better than that. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, check out past episodes, connect with us on social media, or check the show notes. Be sure to check out citationpod.com.
Native season.
Spaniard season.
Native season.
Native season.
Spaniard season. Fire.